We've been, for the last 4 weeks, and up to this week, the 5th week, traveling on a journey with the Gospel of John, John chapter 6, which is all about the Eucharist. And we're about to leave John next week and return to Mark. The first reading here in Joshua, the tribes of Israel are asked, challenged, if they want to stay with God or leave him and go and serve the God of their fathers, the Amorites, the gods of Egypt, the gods of the lands which they've just been through. And in the gospel, the disciples, the apostles, are being asked if they wish to stay with Jesus or if they wish to leave with all the rest. And we are being asked the same question by Jesus. What about you? Do you want to go too? That's the question that's put to us. Let's go back to Joshua. Joshua is near the end of his life. They have conquered the land of Israel. The conquest has just finished, and he's called the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes, together at Shechem. And Shechem is the place where God had called Abraham to. God had promised, as you remember, promised to give him the land of Canaan. He promised to give him as many children as the stars under heaven. And here at Shechem, he brought Abraham and he showed him the land of Canaan and said, "This is the land I will give to you." And now, about 1,000 years later, Joshua is there with the 12 tribes, and the promise of 1,000 years ago is now fulfilled. The land that he promised has been given. They have conquered it. And Joshua is challenging the people. He reminds them, he takes them on a journey of how God led Abraham and all their forefathers, led them as a people from that place, Shechem, through Egypt, through the Red Sea, through the desert, and now here giving them the land. He reminds them of this journey, and he challenges them. Now who are you going to serve? You've seen what God has done for you. You've seen his power. You've seen how he's guided you, how he's led you, how he's taught you, how he's protected you, how he's fed you, how he has gifted you with this land, with cities which you didn't build, vines which you didn't plant, wells that you didn't dig. Are you going to follow him, or are you going to go and serve the gods of these other peoples, the gods of Egypt, the gods of the people of Canaan, the land that you now live in, the people of the forefathers of Abraham? Who are you going to serve? Who are you going to serve? And as one, they reply, "We will serve the Lord our God." Jesus takes his disciples on a journey as well. A different type of journey. This journey is a journey of revelation, of teaching them who he really is, teaching them about the Eucharist. It starts off, as we had 4 weeks ago, with the multiplication of loaves. And then the next week after that, the people follow Jesus. They're looking for him. And Jesus says to them, "I tell you most solemnly, you're not looking for me because you've seen the signs." Remember, the multiplication of loaves wasn't just a miracle, it was a sign. It had a far deeper meaning. You weren't looking for me because you'd seen the signs, but because you had all the bread you wanted to eat. I satisfied your stomach. That makes noise, doesn't it? I satisfied this. And that's why you're looking for me. You want more to fill your bellies. Then Jesus takes them somewhere else. And he tells them that, he says, "Do not work for food that cannot last, but the food that endures to eternal life." That food, he says, "I am that food. I am the bread of life." he hits them with his hammer blow. I am the bread of life, and I give life to the world. So the next week we had them coming and answering this question. How can this man, because Jesus said, I've come down from heaven. I'm the bread that's come down from heaven, the bread of life. And they say, how can this man say, I am the bread come down from heaven? In the Gospel of John, he uses a very specific technique, and it's to do with misinterpretation. Jesus will teach something, and people will not understand. And then Jesus will clarify and help them to understand better. Examples of this for you, okay? Examples of this. In John 3, when what's his name? Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night, and Jesus says, you must be born again. And Nicodemus says, well, how can you be born out of the womb? How can you go back into the womb? How can a grown man go back into the womb and be born again? And Jesus says, no, that's not what I mean. You've got to be born again by water and the Spirit. So he clarifies. With the woman at Samaria at the well, Jesus says, I will give you living water. And she says, oh, well, how can you get that living water? You don't have a bucket. So Jesus clarifies. And then he says, this water I'll give will lead to eternal life. And she says, give me that water always. She thinks it's something physical, but Jesus isn't talking about something physical. So he goes on and explains it. So this same technique is being used here, okay, in this gospel. Because Jesus said, I am the bread of life. I'm the bread which comes down from heaven. Now, if Jesus didn't really mean that, he would explain and say, no, I didn't really mean that. That's what has been happening in the past in John's gospel. Jesus does not do that. He goes on to say to them, yes, I am the bread that comes down from heaven. He says to them, they will be taught, it's written by the prophets, they will be taught by God, and to hear the teaching of the Father is to learn from it, and learn from it is to come to me. And then he goes on and hits them with another hammer blow. I am the bread of life. Anyone who eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I shall eat is my flesh for the life of the world. And they are stunned by that. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? That's where we come in today. This is intolerable language. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? I've just said that, and to you, you've heard this text before, you're probably thinking, well, what's so unusual about that? We've heard this many times before. But the thing is, what Jesus was saying then was truly shocking. It's like, I don't know what you'd think if I said to you, folks, you need to eat this, and I'll slash my wrist, and you need to drink my blood, okay? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? He's a bit of a nutter, isn't he? This man is crazy. And that would have been the effect that Jesus would have had on the people listening to him. What are you saying? You are telling us we have to eat your flesh and drink your blood? That is nuts. That is intolerable language. How can anyone accept this? Now, if Jesus had been speaking symbolically or figuratively, he would have gone back and corrected all of this. But he does not again. Each time, when they understand him correctly, he goes on to reinforce what he is teaching about the Eucharist, that we are to eat his flesh and drink this blood. And if we do not, we will not have life in us. How could anyone accept this? Jesus tells them, it is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh has nothing to offer. The Spirit is the one who enables us to understand this. If we try to understand this with the flesh, we will not succeed. And these people do not understand this. This is a hard teaching. And so at that point, what's it say? What does it say? After this, many of his disciples left him and stopped going with him. It doesn't say a few disciples, it says many. Probably up to a half of his disciples decided, this language, this teaching, I cannot accept. I'm gone. That's the only time in the Gospels this ever happens. And folks, people are still leaving to the church today. They've always left the church when they've been challenged, when we have been challenged by teaching that is difficult. If Jesus had kept going on with the nice teaching, love your neighbor, be kind, all this soft stuff, then they probably would have stayed. But this stuff, no. And today it's the same. Jesus still teaches, and we say, this is intolerable. Jesus teaches us we should not contracept. I cannot accept that. I'm leaving. Jesus teaches us that we should not be having sex before marriage. I can't accept that. I'm gone. Jesus teaches us that marriage is for one man and one woman. No. That's not on. I'm leaving. I can't stay with the church if this is what she teaches. Goodbye. That we shouldn't abort children. No. I can't accept that. That life is from conception to natural death. That is too hard a teaching for me to accept. And I'm sure I could go on. And many leave. And many still leave. Do you think Peter understood clearly what Jesus was teaching when he taught that? He didn't. Jesus turns to him and says, what about you? Are you going to leave me as well? Peter didn't fully understand what Jesus was teaching when he said, eat my flesh, drink my blood, and then you will have life. He didn't. Jesus, I have no clue what you're talking about, but you have the message of eternal life. Because it's you that's saying it, I believe. I don't understand it fully, but you teach it, Lord, so I believe and I accept it. The gift of faith. Believing Jesus, trusting Jesus. And the Lord today is asking each of us the same question, challenging each of us. Who will you serve? As with Joshua, will you serve the gods of this land of Aberdeen, of this land, Scotland, of this land, the UK? Are you going to serve the God of money, the God of lust, the God of power, the God of possessions, the gods of vanity? Who are you going to serve? Are you going to live as a disciple? Will you trust me and follow my teachings even if you don't understand? What about you? Who will you serve? Lord, whom shall we go to? You have the words of eternal life.